This has been a very lovely Advent season for me personally. I've had the opportunity to do a number of special things. One of those opportunities was a chance to revisit a classic old Christmas story. Linda, my wife, had purchased one of those talking books for two of our granddaughters, those two new granddaughters you've heard me talk about. And she wanted me to record the story. As you turn every page, you press a button, and then you read aloud whatever's written on the page. When you come to the end, you press another button that locks in the recording, and then your child will have your voice reading to them, even if they live hundreds and hundreds of miles away, which my granddaughters do. The book in question was Clement C. Moore's "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." It begins with its familiar rhyming pattern and then goes on to describe in great deal a visit from Santa Claus. I had a great time recording it. Every theatrical bone in my body just shook with excitement. Probably the corniest recording of it ever. I mustered up all the gusto I could, and as I intoned the familiar words, I had a great time. One of my very favorite parts of this little book is a picture of the children all peacefully asleep with clouds above their heads with all sorts of sweet treats in them. You remember the line, the children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And speaking of dancing sugar plums, not that I speak of them very often, I also got to see selections from that perennial favorite, the Nutcracker, this season. It too, you may remember, is all about a dream. In particular, one fantastic dream, complete with fighting mice and a handsome Nutcracker prince. The most famous of secular Christmas stories, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. That story is built around a whole sequence of dreams, filling the head of one Ebenezer Scrooge. And of course, who could forget the best-selling Christmas song of all time, the old Bing Crosby standard, White Christmas, in which the singer informs us that he's dreaming of a white Christmas. Are you detecting a pattern here? The stories and songs of Christmas are full of references to dreams. And no wonder, for the original Christmas story, the one found in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, is studded with dreams. Indeed, in Matthew's account, every single plot twist rests on a dream. Indeed, each and every time someone has to make a major decision, they find the answer in a nighttime revelation. Joseph can't decide whether or not he should marry his pregnant fiancée. He has a dream, is told by an angel that it is all right for him to take Mary as his wife and to name the child Jesus. Later, after Jesus is born, the Magi pay him a visit, the wise men, and then they are warned in a dream to stay away from Herod. Joseph, in another dream, is then warned to take Jesus and Mary and flee to Egypt and escape the wrath of Herod. And then finally, in the very end of the story, when they're in Egypt, Joseph has yet one more dream in which he's told it's safe to go back to their homeland. Each and every one of these dreams is crucial to the survival of Joseph and Mary, and most especially Jesus. Had Joseph or the Magi not had their dreams, Mary might have wandered as an outcast, ostracized by society for having a child out of wedlock. Herod might have found the newborn baby in Bethlehem and killed him. Or Jesus might never have returned from Egypt to the land of his birth, a place uniquely prepared for the Messiah. The reality is that if Joseph and the Magi had not had their dreams, you and I, we wouldn't be preparing for Christmas. If Joseph and the Magi had failed to believe their dreams, December 25th would just be another day on the calendar. And if they had not acted on their dreams, ours would be a pretty hopeless situation. But they did dream. They did believe. They did act. And so we find ourselves preparing once again to celebrate the birth of one who brings hope into our living. There is, of course, a powerful lesson in all of this for you and for me. For on this fourth Sunday in Advent, as we read this story about Joseph and his dream, we are reminded that we too must be willing to dream. We too must be willing to believe. We too must be willing to act. Yet all too often we dismiss dreams as frivolous, as a waste of time. Stop daydreaming, we tell children lost in imagining a brighter future. Oh, he's such a dreamer, we say of someone who we think is unrealistic. In your dreams, we sarcastically respond to someone who expresses something seemingly out of reach. We treat dreams as being something less than real, and dreamers, they're out of touch with reality. But if the truth be told, dreams are not less than real. Often, dreams are greater than reality itself. Often, dreams are what propel us forward into a new reality. Often, dreams are what move us into a more promising future. One of my granddaughters who will receive that talking book is a real horsewoman. She loves taking her weekly riding lesson and has ribboned in shows. But she doesn't own a horse. I'm sure she dreams of owning a horse. She's not going to get one from Pop-Up, not this year. But she could probably resonate with little April, the youngest child in the family which peoples the comic strip for better or for worse. In one strip, April is shown playing with her little friends. The friend is stacking blocks, while April rides her rocking horse. Know what I'm going to get when I grow up, she says? I'm going to get a horse, a real one. He's going to be this high, and he's going to run faster than anything, and he's going to be brown and have a white face, and he's going to be beautiful. What you going to call him? Asks her little friend. April looks puzzled. I don't know, she says. I haven't dreamed that far yet. Sisters and brothers, that's our problem too. We often not only fail to dream, but when we do, we don't dream far enough. We settle for less than what God would have us be. When prophets who do dream come along and share their vision, we often call them impractical, unrealistic, or even crazy. But we need dreamers, for they challenge us all to imagine a world where all people are accorded respect. They challenge us to imagine a world where peace and justice aren't just empty words. It is in such dreaming that we begin to draw closer to the reign and will of God. But you see, we also must do more than simply dream. We must believe in our visions as well, and we must be willing to act. John Sullivan Dwight was a dreamer. A Harvard graduate, he lived back in the 19th century. Dwight was a Unitarian minister and a member of the Transcendentalist movement. He was a friend and colleague of folks like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. He dreamed of a world free of violence and a world where men and women worked together for the common good, a world where all people were treated with equality and respect. Dwight joined with another of the Transcendentalists, Bronson Alcott, father of Louisa May Alcott, in establishing Brook Farm in Massachusetts. The members of the Brook Farm community shared all things in common and worked for peace and justice, and most importantly, in those pre-Civil War days, they worked for an end to slavery. In time, the Brook Farm project came unraveled. But Dwight continued to hold to the principles it embodied, including a very strong commitment in those antebellum years to the abolitionist movement. With many, many others, he believed that as long as slavery existed, there could be no true justice and freedom for all. Dwight is considered by many to be the first real critic of classical music in the United States. Working through his periodical, Dwight's Journal of Music, he sought to educate Americans about the joys of Beethoven, Brahms, and other such composers. One of his hopes was to introduce more classically rooted music into the Christmas season. In the mid-1850s, he heard a French carol that immediately caught his attention. It wasn't very old. It had only been written a decade earlier in 1847, but he was entranced by its fluid melody and its powerful words. It had a rather odd history of its own. It was based on a poem written by Placide Cappeau. Cappeau's parish priest had requested a special Christmas poem for midnight mass, and Cappeau had obliged, even though he rarely went to church himself. Later, Cappeau asked his friend Adolphe Adam, a composer, to set the poem to music. It instantly became popular among the French people. But then Cappeau walked away from the church and joined the socialist movement. And it was discovered that the composer, Adam, was a Jew. The church's hierarchy was appalled. It would not do, they said, for a Christmas carol to be sung in church, to have come from such as Cappeau and Adam. It was roundly condemned and deemed unfit for church due to its total absence of the spirit of religion. none of which, however, deterred the American John Sullivan Dwight. For he saw not only a beautiful carol which spoke eloquently of the birth of Christ, but he also saw in it a piece of music that could help advance the abolitionist cause. For like the novelist Harriet Beecher Stowe, author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, Dwight believed the arts could articulate a dream, express a belief, and help move people to action. So it was that he translated and somewhat modified the French carol Cantique de Noël into English. And immediately it became an expression, an anthem of the abolitionist dream. You know it as O Holy Night. The words in question are in the third verse, sung as they first were in the midst of the struggle to eliminate slavery. They take on a whole new significance. In the end, it was dreamers. Dreamers like Dwight and Harriet Beecher Stowe and Frederick Douglass. Dreamers who eventually helped lead this nation out of the darkness of slavery into the new light of freedom. Even as later a dreamer named King would further advance the cause. And a dreamer named Mandela would bring it to his own land as well. It is in dreaming, believing, and acting that the light is made brighter. They did it, and so can you. For if, like Joseph, you're willing to dream, if, like Dwight, you are willing to believe, if, like so many others, you are willing to act, you too can help usher in the light of the world. Amen.